What are we doing as a government to address these challenges? First is the macroeconomic environment. As a government, we believe that a positive macroeconomic environment is a necessary condition for the growth of the private sector in general, but particularly for SMEs. So I'm sure that most of you, within the last 11 months, have witnessed a dramatic turnaround in the performance of our macroeconomy. And this effort has been based particularly on three key strategic considerations. First is maintaining fiscal discipline, and then also making sure that we have fiscal consolidation. Now, fiscal consolidation is very important in maintaining macroeconomic stability. Because if you continue spending what you do not have, then obviously that fuels the indiscipline that has characterized our economy for many years. And so part of the progress that you are seeing is based on this policy of fiscal consolidation. The second element is the prudent management of our monetary policy, which is led by the central bank. And I think that the Deputy Governor has spoken to it. What you are seeing in terms of the reduction in the base rate, the policy rate of the Bank of Ghana, is what is giving rise to the modest reduction in interest rates. And then also by extension, also the stabilization of the currency and other macro indicators that you are recognizing. The third one is ensuring financial stability, which is the extent to which the Bank of Ghana, in consolidation with the government, has been able to create the right environment for our financial institutions to be able to maintain healthy balance sheets. So these three pillars of our macroeconomic framework is what has led to, I believe, a very, very positive turnaround of the performance of our economy. And going forward, as I'm sure it's been made clear through the budget, government intends to ensure that we maintain this stability in the macro framework. But we also know that for SMEs, maintaining macro stability is only a necessary condition, not a sufficient condition. So we've gone beyond that, also to embark on very specific interventions that will support the private sector in general, but also particularly the small and medium enterprises. As a policy, we've made it clear that we want to move economic policy focus away from taxation to incentivizing production and value addition. So it's in recognition of that in the 2017 budget, government abolished or reduced taxes to the extent of almost 1 billion Ghana cedis. And this is all contributing to improving the environment and the cost of doing business in our country. Now, in terms of specific interventions, government has also introduced a stimulus package for distressed companies that are deemed to be potentially viable. Obviously, there are companies that are distressed that may never be able to wake up even with any type of stimulus that you provide. So those are not the ones that we are talking about. But there are companies that are potentially viable and which require this stimulus to turn them around. And hopefully, many of the companies that are benefiting from the stimulus package will fall into the category of SMEs. Secondly is the 1D, 1F initiative, one district, one factory initiative. And it is important for us to recognize that these are intended not to be state enterprises. This is an initiative being undertaken by government to bring industrialization to the doorsteps of the ordinary Ghanaian, but only by facilitating and providing support to the private sector. So the 1D, 1F initiative is led by the private sector with support from government. And my hope, and this is coming up also from the initial results that we are seeing, that a majority of the companies that have applied for the 1D, 1F support intervention would fall into the medium to large-scale industries. Maybe not so much the small, but particularly the medium. And so I can assure you of government's full support for those of you who are interested in the 1D, 1F initiative. Then there's the initiative, One Region, One Pack. As you are all aware, the experience of the Asian countries, particularly China, was very much anchored on the establishment of these industrial parks and special economic zones. So our policy of One Region, One Pack is to again support the private sector primarily to establish an industrial park in each of our 10 regions. Because what this does is to provide dedicated land space and reliable energy utilities to support the growth of companies, particularly, hopefully, SMEs. But we are also aware that the experience in many countries would suggest to us that unless there's a deliberate effort by government to ensure that these SMEs also have access to these industrial parks, you'll find that the industrial parks are mainly populated by large companies, particularly foreign companies. We do not want to have that in our country. We want a balanced growth of our industrial parks. And so whilst we encourage foreign investors to locate in the industrial parks, I'm hoping that we can work with the private sector to create one or two of these industrial parks specifically to become SME industrial parks. And then another pillar of our industrial transformation agenda is to promote exports. And this is one particular area where I hope that SMEs will start looking at seriously. Because yes, the domestic market is important, but when you start looking at the potential for exports, you are extending your market possibilities. Unfortunately for us, we've signed so many agreements which enable us to take advantage of these export market opportunities. There's the Economic Partnership Agreement, which allows us to export duty-free, quota-free to the whole of Europe. Duty-free, quota-free. I'm repeating that. Because if SMEs can recalibrate their own production processes to meet the quality standards demanded by the EU market, I can assure you that this is where you can start making progress in terms of scaling up. Because once you scale up, you need to be able to sell. And that's where the export becomes important. Under the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGWA, again, SMEs can export duty-free, quota-free, 6,400 products and over to the United States market. And I think that it is time that our SMEs start looking at this also very seriously. Beyond that, the biggest thing that is going to happen to Africa is the establishment of the Continental Free Trade Area. So I think David mentioned this, that by the first quarter of 2018, Africa is going to become one continental free trade area. And this provides significant opportunities for SMEs to scale up and to take advantage of the African market. So you don't need to be deterred about the challenges that you have in exporting to Nigeria, for example. It means you can export now to South Africa, to Zambia, to Zimbabwe, Kenya, Tanzania, all over Africa. And so I encourage you to look at this specifically. Yes, exports are important, but I think that most SMEs also start off looking at the domestic market. And so one of the pillars of our transformation agenda is to enhance domestic retail market infrastructure. Because if most SMEs are going to produce for the local market, then it's our responsibility as a government to provide the infrastructure that enhances your ability to be able to sell on the domestic market. So that's another pillar of government. The other pillar is improving the business environment. We all know that Ghana is ranked, beyond the hundreds. We're at 108. We've slipped back on the rankings. But we believe that with government's program of enhancing the business environment through regulatory reform, I can assure you that within the next 2-3 years, Ghana will get back on the rankings where we used to be many years ago. And this is going to help also the SMEs in taking advantage of the business environment. We also want, as a government, to institutionalize the process of public-private sector dialogue. And I think this is particularly important for SMEs. Large companies, yes, sometimes they're able to manage by themselves. Even for them, they require this regular consultation. But I think that the process of institutionalizing regular consultation with SMEs is very important. And so this is a major pillar of government's agenda. And last but not the least, specifically also for SMEs, the National Board for Small-Scale Industry is going to be restructured. And I can assure you that the restructured NBSSI will now become a more efficient and effective institutional support mechanism for small and medium enterprises in this country.